I didn't come up with like a bit to start, but I could just sing That's Amore. It's
Perfect.
the only song used more than various pieces from La Boheme in this movie.
Which you don't sing that. It's fine.
That'd be tough. It's mostly instrumental, and then it's opera, and then you're
Exactly.
like, and then that's just above me at a certain point. But yeah, we'll get into it in a second.
Okay.
I don't know how to start the podcast, as you know, so it'll either be that or something along the lines of Welcome Late to the Movies. My name is Ben Holt. This is a podcast where my friends and I get to fill in our movie blind spots. Each week we'll pick a film that either I or a guest hadn't seen before and really should have by now. This week, continuing Romcom Month Strikes Back, our third episode in 4 weeks because I was out sick 1 week and didn't have a voice for 10 solid days, but oh well. Life goes on. We're doing an all-time classic, one that we've been circling for a while, and one that our guest today, I think this is one of your favorite movies.
Yes, absolutely.
Very excited to talk about. The movie is Moonstruck, and the guest, the left to right across your podcast side, we got Martha.
Hello.
Hello, and I'm excited because this is our first episode. I meant to look up the last one I had done in person, but you can just go back and listen to a few seconds and see which one doesn't sound terrible mic quality wise, and that's probably the last one that was in person.
Probably the one we did at Greg and Ray's house.
It might have been
like over summer.
Yeah. No, it's once it got colder, and then if you're a listener and you're in the Providence area, our friend group's pretty evenly split on either side of the Washington Bridge, and that's made it difficult for us to meet up a little bit. But another situation in which life goes on. So, before we get into the movie, which I am really excited to talk about, Martha, have you seen anything good lately? I know you've been catching up on some Oscar movies.
Yeah, so husband and I have been doing Oscar movies, and the latest and greatest one we just watched was American Fiction. We saw it in theaters, and I'd say, I think it's the third or fourth Oscar nominated for Best Picture movie we've seen, and is right now my favorite. Loved it.
I know you've seen Maestro also.
Loved Maestro.
Barbie, I think you've...
Oh, maybe I've seen more than. So I've seen Maestro, Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, American Fiction. There was one other, Holdovers.
Oh, okay. That's a solid crop.
Right?
Yeah, pretty solid.
And they were all fantastic in their own way. American Fiction was probably, I don't know, it just felt like a classic to me. Like that one, it's timeless. It's hysterical. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
I'm excited to watch it.
I'm looking forward to diving into that with you.
Yeah, I'm going to watch it this week. It's I think it's Cord Jefferson's first movie, but an extremely prominent writer before switching to films. And Jeffrey Wright, who stars in it, I've only ever seen in supporting roles, or like sometimes very big supporting roles, like on Westworld. He's been in the last couple of Wes Anderson movies, which are more ensemble pieces anyway. But I mean, he's an amazing actor.
But what's interesting about the movie was that there was just so many different avenues. Like this, it was a very clear story. There was never like any confusion with it whatsoever, but there were so many different angles of the movie that you could really analyze. Like the fact that, writer, like, just like frustrated career or like really messed up family, even just being a prominent Black family in Boston, there's like on paper has everything together, but then you dive into the stories of each character and you're like, oh, wow. And you're only scratching the surface of each family member. And honestly, every single family member I could have dived into more. Just like all of them wanted, like, you just wanted more from all of them in a really good way. So
I was going to say, based on that description, pairs pretty well with Moonstruck, too. Yeah,
actually, I didn't even think about that. But yeah, very similar in some ways.
And also, is it funny? It looks like...
Yeah, but
okay.
like, there were...
You say it doesn't look like uproarious, but the trailers make it look... Okay, gotcha.
Satire. So like, you're definitely laughing at the jokes that it's making on society. But the jokes had very prominent points to them. So, and it's funny, some of the points that the movie made are like conversations I've heard at work, and they're conversations I've heard like in person about like white wokeness. And Like it's kind of doing like a satire on white wokeness, basically. So just very, very funny, and just really well done. And it's all based in Boston, and then some of it's based on the Cape too. So that part's kind of cool too. And like, there's a very clear like Dunkin' Donuts like advertising. So like little things like that were like, oh, that's kind of cool. So it's good.
So you say that's your favorite of the crop of Oscar nominees you've seen?
I think so. I think so. What's your favorite right now?
Well, that answer's changed since the last time I recorded a podcast because I watched 2 pretty big blind spots since the last time I recorded. And I was extremely ready to come on and say that my favorite of this year of the Oscar nominees that I've watched so far is far and away Past Lives. And I loved it so much. It is amazing.
Okay.
It is so good, and it is most everything that I want from movies.
All right.
So structurally, if you don't know that much about it, it's Greta Lee, who I mostly have ever seen as usually a supporting character in comedies, but it's not that funny. It's a dramatic movie. She plays the same character in a couple different time periods, but the movie starts with these 2 characters when they're 12 in South Korea. And yeah,
I've been wanting to see this one.
And they're friends, but then Greta Lee's character immigrates with her family to America, and like that friendship fractures. 12 years later, through the power of Facebook, the boy reaches out and, they reconnect, and then they're just sort of like video chatting for a while, and then that like peters out for whatever reason. And then 12 years later, in their mid-30s, they meet up actually in person for the first time since they were kids. And that's sort of like,
so cool.
It doesn't exactly line up to like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, but it like kind of does. But the third part of it, them meeting up in New York in their 30s, is sort of the biggest piece of the movie.
So satisfying, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's amazing. So it's another, like Cord Jefferson, another directorial debut. This is from Celine Song, who also a prominent writer and a playwright. And it does this kind of amazing thing where the structure of it and the writerliness of it and the precision of the script is in less deft hands would probably threaten to kind of overtake the emotionality of the movie. But it never does. It's like so nuanced and so played so well. And I'm kind of talking about the almost like forensic level of it because I don't want to talk about the plot too much, aside just from saying like the performances are amazing and it's kind of just worth watching.
All right.
It's yeah, I just love it. It works pretty well with this month that we've been doing. It's not a comedy, but it is quite romantic, I'd say, and not necessarily like goofily romantic like some movies,
like Moonstruck,
but a movie like about romance,
okay,
which is always a little bit more compelling to me than just sort of like a sort of throwaway, just kind of like, not that Moonstruck is, but like a sort of lower level, the kind of rom-coms that get made now.
Yeah.
You should watch it. If you're listening, you should watch it. Right before finishing, less than an hour before I got to your house, I made the wild choice after watching Moonstruck today to watch The Zone of Interest, Jonathan Glazer's new film, which has put me in a strange headspace to talk about romance and comedy. Because that film, if you don't know, that's the new Jonathan Glazer film. He's a British filmmaker. He made Under the Skin, which is great. Scarlett Johansson in the English countryside eating good dudes. And so it's about the domestic life of this man and his wife, and sort of like the home life that they have. And it just so happens that his job is he's the commandant of Auschwitz. And so it's about that.
Great.
The sound design in the movie is incredible. If you can see it in theaters, absolutely worth it.
Really?
Recency bias or whatever, but it is. I always think of, I think it's a Peter Travers review for Rolling Stone about The Dark Knight, the Batman movie, The Dark Knight, where the subhead, and I don't even know if Peter Travers writes the subheads on his articles, or if he was doing so in 2007 when the movie came out, or 2007. but it was like the most hyped I've ever been about a movie because it was like, The Dark Knight is good. And then the subhead was like, a lightning bolt is about to strike the summer movie season. And I always think of like a lightning bolt of a movie. And this is to me a lightning bolt of a movie. It is jarring. It's not like a fun hang. In the chat, the movies that I referenced were a Pitch Upon Where Sitakun's Memoria from a couple years ago, just in terms of pacing and like the nature photography of it. And then the visual language reminded me, like in the way that they shoot the house that these people live in makes it look like a combination of Wes Anderson and German expressionism. I was thinking of Moonrise Kingdom and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is like the main visual things I was getting from the way they were shooting the house. So
I have to see this one.
Anyway, so that's
weird headspace.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, subject matter. It's
subject matter, definitely.
I think in the thread, Greg said it's like the most upset a movie's made him that he thinks maybe ever. So
that says a lot, actually.
Yeah, and he doesn't get upset. With that said, I will do my best to talk about an on its surface pretty delightful movie that I think does have an undergirding of sort of aching and despair in it a little bit.
A little.
Yeah. In a really interesting way. A nice frisson of what promises mean, right, with the people in your life.
Yeah.
And what breaking that can look like. And I don't know. It's not the main part of the movie, but there's never
like an act
not
of forgiveness
present
in there too, and
yes,
yeah,
and like different versions of commitment, I guess.
Yes.
Anyway, I thought this movie was wonderful. I hadn't seen it before. Moonstruck. That's what we're talking about.
I can't believe I can't believe that this has been your first time seeing this movie. So I grew up.
We wouldn't be doing this podcast if not.
It's true. So this was a movie that like I grew up with. It was like one of my parents' favorites. It was like the hit before My Big Fat Greek Wedding, pretty much. Like
a movie that owes a lot to this movie.
Exactly.
For sure.
Right. Yeah, and so I feel like there's I don't know why it became such a favorite, but I think, Family Loves Opera, I think just like it being a classic, there's so many good one-liners in this that really stand out. Yeah, so good.
In the Criterion box for this is an essay by Emily St. James, who I've mentioned before as one of my favorite culture writers, critics, that talks about the kind of binaries that are set up in the movie and how kind of it keeps returning to death.
Yes.
And the opening sequence is both at night and at daytime around New York, but mostly in this Carroll Gardens neighborhood of Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And this sort of Italian-American conclave that has its own thing going on.
Yep.
That feels so vibrant. And like, if the cameras weren't on, these are the routines that are happening. You get that impression. And, speaking of binaries, the ultimate one, the movie is obsessed with death, and people keep being, why are men like this? Because they're afraid of death.
Yeah.
And the opening sequence ends on directed by Norman Jewison, projected over a corpse in a funeral home.
Yep.
Norman Jewison died about a month ago today. And so that was like, oh, okay, yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah.
A big director. In the Heat of the Night, the film version of Fiddler on the Roof are probably the two main pulls besides this for him. I like this more than those movies, though.
Yeah, and I can't believe the timing. Like we talked about this a few months ago.
Yeah.
So timing was perfect.
Yeah. You mentioned all the good one-liners. The writer, John Patrick Shanley, is a really prominent playwright.
And he won Best Screenplay for this. Yeah.
Yes, he did. For like real, I don't know. I mean, he got also nominated for a bunch of stuff. Doubt was one of his first on stage, won a bunch of Tonys, then got nominated for a bunch of Oscars as the Meryl Streep, Philip Seymour Hoffman movie.
Made an opera.
Yep. Anyway, yeah. Normally we start with a 1-minute plot summary. You want to do one? You want me to do one? It's weird. I feel all off balance because you normally have headphones and.
That's well. Who usually does it? Is the person who's never seen it before?
No rules, just vibes. If you want to do one, I can too. It's fine.
I can whip one out.
Okay.
All right. So, as Ben said, it's about an Italian American family that lives in Brooklyn. It is a love story, but it is a weirdly wild ride, filled with punchline story. Love story that has just remained a classic. The family, as Ben said, the family just like lives their usual lives, but there's a lot of nuances, and you experience what it's like to grow older, what it's like to not have life the way you expected, and you just watch this Italian American family kind of live in that moment, something like that.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
A really young Nicolas Cage is there. This is his breakout year. This is the same year as Raising Arizona. In his 20s, then Cher is, I think, 40 when she shoots this, but she's famous at 19, so has been famous for more than half of her life at this point.
Yeah. And this is a very different vibe for her.
Yes.
Than her singing career.
There is a tendency for, people who are as famous as Cher is, or, big diva types to sort of de-glam, and then that's their attempt at like winning an Oscar, right? Is like they de-glam, right? And the version of that in this movie is almost like a 2000s high school teen comedy thing where she just kind of has her hair pulled back for the first half of the movie.
Yep.
But like it's still Cher.
You know what it is? It's like Princess Diaries.
A little bit, yeah.
Kind of reminds me of that.
A little bit, yeah. But she does have, they give her like some gray hairs and like she's kind
a
of
unibrow.
Just, yeah. And it is sort of just like, it's not so much that they're ignoring that like this is obviously somebody who has megawatt star power, but it's sort of present the whole time that like yes, that is a person that does that, but like they're not interested in like rising to that level anymore. They've kind of feel like they missed their shot at becoming whatever their ceiling was.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like you said, life not turning out the way you were expecting it to. And so I think that's a really interesting way to play that transition. And it makes sense because she's not like an awkward teen. She's a woman.
37 years old.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So like that would be weird. She's been married before. Her husband died about 7 years ago. By the time this movie happens. Structurally, so John Patrick Shanley mentioned he's a playwright. Mentioned before, Celine's song, the way that movie is structured in like 3 very specific parts. This movie takes place on over three very specific nights and the mornings after.
Yep.
And is really cool. I just like when movies are contained and the narrative is just sort of happening.
Me too. Like it picks up. It just picks up wherever their lives were already at.
Yep.
And it just kind of unfolds.
Yep.
Yeah. I love stories like that.
Yep. And where we start is in a restaurant that we'll return to a couple times throughout the movie.
The only restaurant
in town in the neighborhood. And Danny Aiello is awkwardly trying to propose to Cher. I forgot all the character names. Johnny Camerari is
trying to propose to Cher's character, Loretta.
Yep.
I was like, huh? And yeah, he's just super awkward about it. He has like a 3-piece suit on. He's kind of sweating. He keeps like scratching his scalp. As one of the waiters said, like he's been a bachelor customer for like 20 years at that restaurant. And clearly like there's not a lot of like romance in the relationship, but it's just a relationship that probably just feels comfortable for the two of them. And it's funny that like he they're having dinner before he has to go to Italy because his mother is dying. And Loretta is already like, don't eat the oily fish. You got, can't be sick on the plane. Like already kind of bossing him around. And you can tell it just has like no opinion for himself whatsoever.
No. People repeatedly call him a baby throughout the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And so already like sets the stage up for like kind of like a poor, like she's the one that like, as you were saying, it's funny, like she's the one that kind of like had a different life. You feel bad for her, but he's the one that like feels like the poor thing almost in the relationship. Yeah. Like she's still like kind of doing her thing. So I always thought that dynamic was kind of interesting, but so he proposes, but like she forces him to go down on one knee. Like he didn't even think about that. Like
no, he didn't have a ring.
She what are those rings called with like the men's?
They just refer to it as a pinky ring.
Pinky ring, yeah. Signet ring or something.
Yeah.
I just like the whole dynamic. This is a good suit. Why am I going to go down on my knees? Yeah. It's a good suit. And she's like, I bought the suit with you. It comes with 2 pairs of pants. Like, I love the writing is just so quick and so sharp.
Yep.
And so simple.
It really is. And then he goes off to the airport and,
the plane gets cursed by an old lady
who doesn't believe in curses, but
Loretta doesn't. Yeah. But, and that's right. The old lady doesn't either.
Yep. It's all really good and sets the tone really early that everything is, it has a weird tone, I would say, not in a bad way, but just like everything is raised and a lot of people are going pretty big. But there still is like some naturalism is maybe the wrong word, but everyone is only like a couple percentage points more clever than they maybe would be in arguments.
Yes. Yes,
100%. But this is all like a believable family unit, I would say.
Yeah.
Or in the relationships they have with each other. We haven't even talked about like the parents yet, but just saying like, these people would all be related.
Yep.
And this is how they would talk to each other. In the middle of all the people going big, I think Olympia Dukakis playing her mom, Rose, I want to say.
Rose, yeah.
She's awesome in this.
She, besides Cher, I feel like she like, in Nicolas Cage, she like wins the show.
Yeah.
Literally, she won
yep.
an award for it. She's won. It's my favorite. It's actually one of my favorite scenes where like Cher comes home, her dad's like sleeping, and like the whole thing's hysterical. She's like, I have an announcement. I have a surprise, and dad is not even like jumping up and down, being like, "What is it?" He's like, "All right, let's go find your mother." So immediately, like they go upstairs, Rose is already sleeping, and they wake up Rose. The first thing she says is, "Who died?"
Yeah,
like completely classic, and I feel like it's relatable because there was a time as a kid where, like, especially like, I don't know, like a kid with like parents involved in like choir or whatever, like church choir, like there was always like an old person like passing away, so it felt super relatable, like you were saying earlier, like death is always on their mind. Always. So, of course, that's the first thing she says.
Yes. And she's the one who keeps bringing up death and, and reminding men that they will die despite what they do today.
Everyone.
Yeah. And yeah, Vincent Gardenia is playing her dad and is awesome.
Yeah.
He's also great. Very funny.
Yeah.
He's probably the most purely comic, but also one of the more tragic figures in the movie, too.
Probably the most tragic.
Yeah.
I would say, but we'll get to that.
Yes. When all of the plot lines get resolved in the same scene at the end, I like his resolution where he stands up and slams the table and then just sits down and goes, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, so good.
So good. The one thing that Danny Aiello, Johnny, asks her to do before they get married, before he gets back, is to call his brother, who they haven't spoken in 5 years because of their bad blood, Ronnie. Everything all the Nic Cage stuff is awesome in this movie and so good. I think it says so much about the character of Johnny that the bad blood that they have is very clearly not Johnny's fault.
No, not at all.
But yeah, you're expecting it to be like, oh, they had a disagreement over a woman or something.
Or a girl was stolen, or...
And the way that when she finally meets up with Nic Cage, only almost a half hour into the movie, that story starts with him being like, he was about to get married, and you're like, oh, this is going to be like and it's like, oh no, and then I was distracted and my hand got caught in a bread slicer.
Yep. I lost my hand. It's like one of the best, most dramatic scenes of all time.
My bride.
Johnny has his hand. Johnny has his pride.
Yeah. Oh God.
Such a ridiculous scene.
Yep.
And the having like the wait staff in the back crying over it, like just like
everyone's
adds
just going
to
so
the
big.
Everyone's just going big. Well, actually, even before that, it adds up to the bigness because Johnny calls Loretta from Italy with his like dying mother in the background.
The scene is also hilarious.
Which is hilarious because look, Loretta even calls it out, being like the mom is just like big mouth, like quotations on her deathbed, but like is talking normally, like making weird, like sassy comments. And Loretta's even like, yeah, she's on her deathbed and I can hear her with her big mouth. So it's like setting up the scene for like the most traumatic scene, or like not traumatic, but like dramatic scene out of the whole movie with Nicolas Cage yelling about losing his hand. So good.
So good.
I wish I actually got to watch your reaction to that scene because it's just so ridiculous.
Yeah. I just love him yelling, Chrissy, get the big knife. It's really funny.
Chrissy, get the big knife.
And then I wouldn't say that this is like a one-to-one. We were talking last episode about Pretty Woman being sort of like early, and that's even a few years after this. That's 1990, and it's not quite in the exact rhythms of like the later in the 90s into the early thousands rom-coms. And this movie also isn't really in those rhythms. And then also John Patrick Shanley doesn't really get boxed in by form anyway. But that, not that whole scene, but that part of the scene, once then Nic Cage and Loretta both leave the room, and then it goes back to Chrissy, and that ends on like a very classic rom-com beat where she's just like, it says like, I love him, but I can't tell him. And
John,
but he doesn't know or something. It's very funny.
Johnny could never love me because he'll always love his girl. Yeah.
That's good shit. Anyway.
So then transitions to Ronnie and Loretta going upstairs in the apartment where she just randomly, it feels like it's like 10 o'clock in the morning, randomly just makes a mistake and like buttered spaghetti. It's like, okay, this is where we're at.
Begrudgingly admits that it's pretty good.
Yep. And apartment is not at all what you expect.
Nope. From listening to opera.
Has pictures of Verity on his wall. Yeah. And they're talking about how he's a wolf.
Yeah.
She's not a wolf.
Yeah. And then they're having sex within like 5 minutes after yelling at each other.
He flips the table over.
Yep.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. It's good. It's just good. It's such a weird movie, but it's all really good.
But you know what's funny too is I never really noticed this until now, but it rarely has like any background noise or music during like those scenes. Only like when there's like a big like dramatic scene. Even then, like it didn't with Ronnie like screaming about his hand. But I think that's what kind of makes it like stark almost, like a weird starkness is like there's nothing covering it. It's just like it's out there.
Yeah. So they end up, like you said, it feels like that's at 10 a.m., but then they wake up the next day after the crazy moon. There's one thing is it's even though those two are definitely the stars of the movie, it is fairly evenly ensemble-y split between both of her parents doing things, and then occasionally her aunt and her uncle in there too.
Her grandfather, and that like they talk about the big moon,
Yeah.
which is why the whole movie's called Moonstruck.
Yes. That sometimes there's a big moon that drives Italians insane.
And like Love Struck, which there's like a whole
that's
like
more of the point.
there's like a whole scene about that at like a dinner with the parents and the aunt and uncle while Loretta is in Ronnie's bed, like across town.
Yes. And that is a very bright moon.
It is a very bright moon. What
for like multiple nights in a row.
Yeah. La Luna.
Yeah.
And the grandfather just has like 12 dogs howling at it.
Yep. He keeps trying to feed them pasta.
Yep. So then move on to the next morning. Somehow Loretta wakes up the next morning and it's just like, what the F have I done?
Yep.
But she was not drunk the night before, like clearly in her right mind, but somehow the morning.
It wasn't even, it was like midday the day before.
Somehow the next day is when it struck her like, oh,
this is bad.
I'm engaged. This is bad.
This is bad. Yep.
And then Ronnie's like, you ruined my life.
Your life was ruined when I got here. You ruined my life. He's already in love with her. She slaps him and says, snap out of it. Yep. That's a pretty famous line.
Yeah.
And it's really good. And it's one of those things that gets pulled out into clips and, you know, sizzle reels of the Oscars and stuff like that. But even in the context of the movie, it doesn't stand out a ton. It is like,
no.
Like I said earlier, these are all things that you can imagine these people saying to each other. Like somewhere in the world, these people exist. And even though it does have that Gilmore Girls thing where everyone's just a bit more clever than they maybe would be, it still all works as believable people, I think.
Totally.
So yeah, he invites her to go to the opera that night.
I want to take you to the opera.
He only loves two things, her and opera. And if he could combine those things, then he'd gladly give up the rest of his life, I think he says.
Yep. Spot on.
And even though she knows it's a terrible idea, she agrees. And then there's sort of the subject of the Emily St. James not review, but essay that accompanies the Criterion edition is this makeover sequence that she goes through to get ready for the opera and how it ages well. It's not even necessarily aging well because most of the makeover sequence, unlike pretty much every other movie that has one, happens just with Loretta, like in her room by herself, looking at herself in the mirror. And it's all like for her more.
Yeah.
And she spends more time with herself and the audience spends more time with her than usual before anyone else sees her. She's not like coming out and getting approval or whatever, coming out of a dressing room from friends or from a man or anything. It's just like all for her. And she like, you know, turns into Cher and then goes to the opera.
Big hair and beautiful dress. Yeah, it's like a total Cher move. I never thought of it that way. Like, because there are
I hadn't either. This is a much smarter person than me that had that idea.
Yeah, because like you do, like there are some scenes where she's like looking at herself in the mirror and you're like, oh, okay, cool. And like you move past it, but I never really put that together.
That the actual like clothes part of it, you see that she goes into a store and you assume she bought that dress, but she doesn't put it on until she's home by herself in her room, like in the mirror.
Pours herself a glass of wine.
There's like candlelight and music playing, but still
prepping for the opera.
Yeah, and then it's that thing where like you know that's Cher the whole time, but then it's like, oh, okay. Like her hair's big. It's not necessarily the style that I look for in women, I'd say. Because her hair is like 6 feet wide.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
But yeah, obviously it works for her.
It works for her. It's totally glamorous.
So they go to the Met.
They go to the Met where she didn't know where it was.
She didn't know where it was. She makes fun of one of the Marc Chagall murals.
Yeah,
there.
it's a little gaudy.
It's all gaudy. It's like, yeah, he was having fun, I think is what
That's exactly
Ronnie
it.
says.
Which is like a famous mural in the Met, still there. They go see the famous La Boheme, which is performed like every like around Christmas holiday ish at the Met. And you like hear like soundtrack of La Boheme like playing throughout.
Yes, used really, really intentionally throughout the movie.
Yeah. And so then actually pausing that.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit to the dad.
Yeah.
Because that's where like.
Yes, that's where this
the two
intersects.
paths
Because he's
kinda
had a number of scenes with MoMA, I want to
Yeah.
say.
So we catch him.
I don't know if her name's MoMA or I just have the word Met stuck in my head and then thinking of like the Met and then the MoMA as New York Art Museums.
That's fine. But yeah, so like we catch him like going back a little bit while like Loretta's like getting while she's getting her makeup done and like her hair or whatever. Her dad is a plumber, makes like a really good living. We kind of get those vibes from like their big house in Brooklyn. We catch him with like a couple of customers. And then the next scene is like him with this other woman that he's like pretty much seeing on the side, who is like the total opposite of Rose. Like this girl's got like a push-up bra, like short hair, long nails, like very not glamorous, but we'll say glamorous for now.
That style's in now, the mob wife style.
Mob wife style.
Very, very in right now.
Yep. Who like totally admires him, thinks he like says the greatest things, you know, all this stuff.
Yeah.
So clearly like he's having an affair.
It costs money. It costs money because it saves money. Copper pipe, which is the only kind of pipe I use.
What'd they say?
Yeah.
So then we're at the opera. And well, actually, pausing all this too is before Loretta's makeover, she goes to church to confession, and her mom's in the pews.
Yeah.
And her mom like says like, you know, like I think like dad's having an affair basically, and you know Loretta's like, you're making it up, don't worry about it. So clearly like Rose's instincts are spot on. He's having an affair. So Loretta has the makeover. We're at the Met. And so while she's at the Met, her dad's also at the Met with this other woman.
Mm-hmm. And Rose goes out to, that's the night she goes back to the restaurant?
She goes back to, like, what is it, Gran Tino or something like that, yeah.
And ends up having dinner with, I think that actor's name is John Mahoney.
Yeah, we haven't even touched that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to pause and talk about that one. Why does he keep going back to the same restaurant?
He has a routine. Everyone has a routine.
I guess I never picked up on that. But this guy he's a professor, keeps going out with his students and brings his student dates to the restaurant, and it's the same routine. He keeps getting splashed in the face because he's a jerk.
This is the second time in 3 nights that this has happened to him that we've seen. No one went to that restaurant on night 2. It could have happened.
And he says the same thing where, like, you know, the woman splashes like a martini or something in his face, and he says, you know what? He's like, I need you to cover up all evidence of her, get rid of her, and bring me a big glass of vodka. Yeah. Same routine.
Same routine.
Yeah.
And and that guy, like, it's funny because you're like, is she gonna like yell at him or whatever? It's like, not really.
Rose?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like, you're like, this guy obviously sucks and is very creepy.
So creepy.
But she's kind of like, at least there's someone to talk to, I guess.
I think she's kind of like, honestly, I think she's kind of testing out the waters of like.
Yes. I think it is like an interesting conversation for her to be like, okay, here's the kind of guy who sucks. What makes men suck?
Yeah, I think it's an experiment for her of
this guy is an expert on why men suck.
Exactly. So growing up for me, this like her lines were always like the repeats of like, why do men chase women? And like professors like, oh, you know, just kind of goes on a whole thing. And she's like, I think it's because they fear death. So like, It's like always stuck with us. Because I think it's just absolutely hilarious. And then it dives into it later, towards the end of the movie.
Yep.
But yeah, Professor like tries to make moves on her, like gives her the weird like cheek kisses, and she's like, I'm too old for you.
Yeah.
So she definitely like, I think it's just experimenting.
And she runs into Cosmo's dad while she's out there. The grandpa of the house.
Who's like the
Who's
real
chill.
winner. He's the real winner of the
chill.
whole family.
He's discreet. He gets it.
Living his best life, I swear.
Yeah, just walking his 8 dogs at seemingly midnight.
Yeah. La Luna, woo!
And there's that was a good time to break because there's an act break in the opera, and they're out there, and she's not really into it yet. And so I'm thinking of we did Pretty Woman last week, and they go to see La Traviata.
Yeah,
and before it starts, Richard Gere goes, the first time you see opera, you either fall in love with it and you're in love with it forever, or you don't, and you can learn to like it more, but it'll never actually be part of your soul.
It's pretty accurate.
And so she's like, it's not part of her soul. She's just not feeling it. But then when they go back in there and they're watching it, and she's sort of, again, referring to that essay because they put it better than I could. She falls in love with opera and Ronnie at the same time.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And that scene's awesome.
It totally is. Well, I mean, part of it, I think, is like the timing of La Boheme, because it's the third act. And so like the character she's watching that's singing like has tuberculosis, is like clearly dying, like once like misses the love of her life. Like things are just like not going well in act 3. And then act 4, as Cher's character says, like she dies. And La Boheme, there's like a reason why people like fall in love with the opera. It's like La Traviata. It's like, you're like, I think it was an opportunity for her to like see something that just had so much meaning, and like Ronnie was like opening up to her and like allowing her to see that. So I think that's why it's like pretty prominent that like she falls in love with them both at the same time.
Yeah, it's a really interesting reading. I think it's like, this sort of exchange of understanding of like, this guy seemed sort of not necessarily like a meathead, but like definitely like kind of a wild sort of hothead on the surface.
Yeah.
But then there's obviously like some depth there and some other things going on.
Totally. Which kind of has moments of that in the opera too. So that's why it's like kind of an interesting parallel, but they don't really dive into the opera so too much. It's like, you got to know it.
Yeah.
A little, but you just got to know that it's really like, that it's meaningful, and then she dies at the end, and like, that's that.
Yes. And then it's conveyed really well that you don't notice that, like, you can see the shot of Cher where you can tell her eyes are like welling up, but it's not until she turns her head to look at Ronnie that you see that like tears have been streaming down her face.
Oh, such a good
it's really
scene.
good. And then they like slowly touch hands or whatever, and it's just really hot. I don't know. And it's great. They like, it's a wonderful depiction of just connection.
Exactly. Exactly.
And yeah.
Good way of putting that, Ben.
But on the way out, after they have that like great moment together, well, first she says that was awful, and he's like, "What?" Like,
she died. That's it. She died. She was hacking.
Yep. And then they bump into her dad in the lobby
with the other woman, and then her dad's like, "I didn't see you."
Yeah.
Like, I didn't see you.
Yep, because they both shouldn't be there with the people they're there with.
Yeah, and they're both calling each other out on it.
And it's another moment of you understand, like, both of her parents are seeing in her, a lot of opportunities to either like to sort of turn into the versions of them that they don't like so much.
Yeah.
That they have like, anxiousness about that isn't, mentioned My Big Fat Greek Wedding owes a lot to this movie. It doesn't have that depth going on.
No, it definitely doesn't.
It doesn't have like 3-dimensional characters.
It goes like in a different area of depth, but
yeah,
it's sort of. Yeah. So then Ronnie like tries to like cheer her up, takes her out to dinner or like drinks or whatever, and it's just like not happening.
She's just over it.
Just totally over it. So then while this is all going on, Rose is back at home after her evening out, and Johnny shows up back from Italy. His mother did not die. It was a miracle. He, as he says, she like gets up and starts cooking for the whole house, the mourners and for him. And he doesn't, it's very vague. He just says like, I need to talk to Loretta. And, you're just assuming like, all right, it's time for the wedding now. Like he's come back, time to get married. So, but Loretta does not go home that night. She goes back to Ronnie's apartment, even though she didn't realize that she was walking towards the apartment the whole time. She pretty much was like mad at Ronnie because she thought that like once they saw the opera, like he would leave her alone. And he's like, nope, sorry, this is it. I'm not going to leave you alone. Just get upstairs and get in my bed.
Yeah. And I mean, the speech he gives her that ends in that, which works, is great. It is like
classic love speech.
Yeah. I think the Fleabag speech that the hot priest says, like, love is the worst, is that hot priest speech from Fleabag that people are always putting in Instagram reels. Feels like it owes a lot to this too. Except it doesn't end that way.
Right.
That one ends on like an upbeat. But yeah, we're here to ruin ourselves and to break our hearts and love the wrong people and die.
Yep.
The storybooks are bullshit. Now I want you to come upstairs with me and get in my bed. Yeah, it's just good. Yeah, love to make things nice. It ruins everything.
Yep. Yeah, I mean,
he's right. They're both very messy.
He's right. I mean, like that was like another interesting thing about it, about the story, is like love is not clean and easy. It's messy and it completely changes your life and it can be complicated. But you got to go with it.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And so she does.
Yeah. Yeah. She's been sort of like, it's a big night for her. She's sort of like, allowing herself to be sort of alive again in a way that you think she probably has been tamping down with much effort. And like, this guy is weird and strange, but is exciting. And she hasn't been excited for quite a while.
Well, yeah. Well, and part of it, that's the reason why I think too, because this was another theme, is that she thinks that she had like why she kept like pushing it down too, is that she thinks she has bad luck.
Yeah. Because
like she got married in like the courthouse, her husband got hit by a bus. So like clearly she has bad luck and now everything has to be right and just so. But I think Ronnie kind of like showed her like, it's not a matter of luck. It's just like life.
It should be messy.
Exactly.
And then that culminates in the morning after, where every plot line sort of converges around a breakfast table,
which is the best part, around bowls of oatmeal.
Right, bowls of oatmeal. Every character who has had more than 2 lines in this movie, besides that weird professor, comes to breakfast. And it's all really funny and ties up really neatly, but not overly neatly. Like you can kind of get, it's like, oh, Danny Aiello should be more mad at them. It's like, yeah, maybe, but it's sort of just like,
it works.
It's fine. He's kind of just like, life is weird.
Yeah.
It's a good attitude to have for a guy like that.
Totally.
But anyway, the news in town, like you already mentioned, the night before he came by, and so Rose knows he's back in town, and when
come
Loretta
the
gets
next
back,
morning.
which after the morning shot when she's leaving, and it's that sort of like
It's one of my
in
favorite
between,
moments.
she's kicking the can down the street.
Yeah.
It's that great like early morning, the city hasn't really woken up yet
Yeah.
kind of moment in time.
And she looks so at peace.
Yes. It's great. And then she gets home and finds out Johnny came back much earlier than anticipated.
Yep. And she's got a love bite on her neck.
Yep. And then everyone starts showing up.
Dad comes back. Oh yeah, and then this is one of the best parts too, is that so the whole time when like Loretta like announced that she was engaged, the dad was like, I'm not paying for your wedding, even though like he could totally afford it.
Yeah.
And I love that the grand, like clearly like we're so past the idea of the wedding at this point because so much has happened like to the audience. And the grandfather comes back and he's like, son, I must speak. I don't say much, but I must speak. You must pay for your daughter's wedding. And he's like, okay, Pop.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, cool. We're still at this.
Yeah. Nic Cage pops in. She looks at his collar, says, you got a love bite on your neck too.
Yep.
Your mom recovered from death. He goes, we're not very close, so I'm not very moved, or whatever he says to that effect. And then they have like a weird conversation where he eats oatmeal. And I like how the parents are just like rolling with him being there. And they're like, yeah, he's here too. Sure. Why not?
Yeah, well, the icon, like, again, no music, no like background noise, nothing. It is the clear, awkward.
It's very funny.
Family moment.
You can see this whole scene working really well on stage.
Yes.
With just the silences being the comedic beats.
And like the eye contact, like the eye movements of so many of them, like just like scanning the room, Cher just like rolling her eyes at certain moments, being like, what the fuck is going on right now?
The aunt and uncle show up and they all freak out because they think it's Johnny, and Cher's like, I'll go. And this is after we already described when Rose asked him to stop seeing that woman. And
Yep. Which to me, honestly, is actually such a beautiful scene.
I mean that's
like
why Olympia Dukakis wins the Oscar, probably.
Yeah,
it's the way she plays that.
Well, and even him too, being like
he gets nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah, because like you can like it's the first time you feel for him because he feels like his life is like worth nothing. So he was again chasing something, and it kind of validates like Rose's point of like men are afraid of death. So like they're chasing after something, and he like validated it, being like, yeah, my life's worth nothing, and seeing her just like well up it's like such a moving scene.
It's such a shitty thing to say, but and then she like immediately like makes him feel terrible probably about it. It's like, he's like, well, in this context, that's it's really nice.
Yeah. So aunt and uncle show up.
Yep, I love. They just kind of stand there. They get coffee. They get oatmeal, and they get I forget if it's
they forget.
The
she
uncle
gets
goes
the deposit, like their money. So like they're worried about that. But yeah,
but then they're just kind of standing there. I forget which one goes. So what are we doing? We're waiting. We're waiting. Waiting for what? Johnny Camerari.
And the best part is like, so the aunt so Johnny's like at the door, or Ronnie's at the door. No, Johnny's at the door, and the aunt goes and gets him, and she walks back into the kitchen and she goes, it's Johnny Camerari.
Yeah.
And here comes Johnny, just like once again the biggest goofball ever.
Yeah.
Being like, hey, Ronnie,
yeah,
you have you peace with me? And you're like,
yes, but also and before they can like admit what they've done that's bad to him, he says, I can't marry you because my mother will die.
But then she gets mad. Loretta's like, what?
Yeah,
you made a promise to me.
Yeah.
And Ronnie's like, hey, whoa, wait.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Wait, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, it totally ends up fine. But then Johnny asks for the ring back. And Ronnie proposes like within 2 seconds and is like, hey, Johnny, can I have the ring?
Yeah. And very, I mean, this is bookending the movie, so it's not that difficult to be like, oh, this is setting up an obvious parallel. She doesn't care that he's not kneeling or doesn't have his own ring.
Right.
Because she actually loves him.
Exactly.
That it also bookending Olympia Dukakis asking, do you love him? And her going, I think
I love him awful.
She goes, oh, that's too bad. Great line.
I love him awful. That's too bad. But then the best part is the grandfather's crying, and you're like, oh my goodness, he's crying of joy. And he's like, no, I'm so confused.
I'm confused.
It's like class.
Yeah. Yeah, guys was like, what's wrong, Bob? He goes, I'm confused. It's a great, it's so funny.
Oh my God, it's my favorite part.
Then they're popping some champagne.
Throwing some sugar cubes in the champagne.
Yeah, get fizzy. And Danny Aiello is just sort of sitting in the background, like, oh, this sucks. And then the grandfather comes over. He's like,
family.
Your brothers got engaged. You have to celebrate. You're part of the family.
He's like, oh, okay.
And he kind of just like, by the end, he gets into it. To family.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And then
Vin Diesel shows up. He says, salute mi familia.
And then I love
Coronas.
how like they like take the camera like slowly out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
They kind of like go through the house in the dark a little, and then they just like land on probably like the ancestors that like came to America.
That kitchen is so brightly lit, and the rest of the house is so dark all the time.
Just all of a sudden.
More of the binaries. That's from the essay also. But yes, ending on who you imagine is the people who brought their family name to America. And then it's their weird family photo that Danny Aiello is very prominent in, which is even funnier. Yeah, good stuff. Weird movie, but great.
I forget that it would be a weird movie if you've seen it for the first time.
I loved it though. So funny. Like I said before, it doesn't necessarily fit into the rhythms of what you'd call the kind of romantic comedies that you'd figure I'd celebrate during this themed month that I haven't. Any of the three that we've done aren't really.
Yeah, why did you pick Moonstruck? It's just because there's so many.
Yeah, I just wanted to do it.
Cool.
Wanted to. Or I could say it's something like, well, we did like, maybe we're just doing like these huge stars of the last 20 years, 30, 40 years, where there were breakout roles. So this is, you get Nic Cage in this one. We got Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. But there's no rhyme or reason. It's just, it's all vibes.
True. Well, like to your point though, it's just like, it's not your typical romantic comedy compared to like all the others that like you've done, in the month, or even just like the spectrum of them.
It doesn't necessarily, I wouldn't say it really fits into any one category though. As much as it fits into anything, it is maybe a comedic romance movie.
Probably, yeah.
But it does have a lot of rom-com beats and like the instant attraction, and like they have sex pretty early in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's good.
Awesome.
Good stuff. You want to get into ratings?
Yeah.
Sure. Cool. On a scale of 0.5 to 5, on any scale of your choosing, going up by halves, any scale besides stars, what would you give Moonstruck?
5 M&Ms.
Why M&Ms?
Well, so I really wanted to do stars because right now I see stars in my visual, but you can't do stars. And
there you go.
Don't know. I was counting M&Ms with my daughter earlier, and and they're delicious.
Yeah.
So M&Ms.
Like M&Ms. For me, it's 4.5 out of 5 big knives.
Okay.
Yeah.
4.5. That's actually like a really good rating.
Chrissy can go get 4.5 big knives.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to slit my own throat. I want you to watch it. 4.5 times. Yeah. Maybe up to a 5. I'm an easy grader. I'll say it's 5 big knives. Yeah.
And I was about to change it to 4.5. I think 4.5 is appropriate though, because it is not your typical.
I like form breaking. It's not formulaic really that much at all. It has a lot of beats that are in common with other things, but that's not necessarily at the same time. The pacing within each scene is atypical. It's a lot more like stage kind of stuff because
Has it become a
it's
stage
very
production at all?
I don't know, it could be pretty easily, but the scenes are very long and each has sort of like an arc that happens in that scene. It's not really quick. It's not really they're here, then they're there, and then it's like how most movies are made. Not even like a nowadays thing. Even then, that's how most movies are made. But the scenes go on really long, and there's a lot of dialogue.
And you could probably like regarding the scenes themselves. I mean, the Met would be kind of a challenging one, maybe, but realistically, you're looking at four backdrops where it could be like a round like the like the turntable like stage because it's the house, the restaurant, his apartment, maybe like a store or two, and then the Met. So like
and the sorry, I didn't mean to yawn at the mic, but I just kind of happened.
No.
I think I checked. You hit the end credits before 100 minutes. It's like an hour 39 and a half minutes. And so it's really, this is a perfect length for a movie.
It goes by fast.
All of John Carpenter's best movies are an hour 40. So I always think an hour 40 is the perfect length for a movie.
Yeah. Because I mean, with this
Zone of
movie,
Interest,
if it went any
144.
longer, it would have been like it would have been dragging.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's very zippy. There's like nothing that you'd be like, that scene didn't need to be there. Like it all needs to be there. Even maybe some of the stuff with the aunt and uncle, I guess, is maybe what you could take out. But they're the least vital of the main crew. But
they add to it. So
yeah, and he's the one that explains why the name of the movie is what it is. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, I liked this a lot.
I'm glad you did. Thanks for watching it.
Absolutely. So we thread a common question on theme for the month through each of them. This month, Romcom Month Strikes Back, the question has been taking any actor from any era and any version of that actor. So you can say like a young version of this person and an old version of that person. Cast the perfect rom-com.
Oh, God. This is so hard.
For some reason, in the Groundhog Day Part 2 episode, we thought the best option was Channing Tatum and 80s Demi Moore. We also said like...
I could see that.
Then we got around to like current Leo and current Adam Driver for some reason was the pick last week.
Adam Driver would be an interesting choice.
Yeah. So just have them do Marriage Story, but now it's funny.
Yeah, exactly. That would be Adam Driver. I would have never thought of that, but that's a solid one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He's very funny in Girls as a romantic interest of the main character.
I have not seen it.
It's a good show.
Good to know. All right, I'll have to try. Oh, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I honestly think of Chris Evans immediately, but like a younger Chris Evans.
Okay. The old Fantastic Four era Chris Evans.
Probably. Yeah. I would recast him in Moonstruck or just any rom-com.
You're going to make a rom-com and you're starting with the leads.
All right. Yeah, definitely Chris Evans. I think it's because I actually remember, I think of Chris Evans a lot because of the Nanny Diaries. I don't know why. But like it sticks out in my brain.
All right.
Chris Evans. But then female.
My pitch, young Chris Evans, Nanny Diaries, young Chris Pine, Princess Diaries 2.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's another one.
So there you go.
Yeah, totally.
Those two.
Just them.
Yeah, it's fine.
Just them.
They'll figure it out.
There's also another one. He's British. Just throwing that in there.
Okay. All right.
Hold on.
Right. Is it a British guy named Chris?
He was in Downton Abbey. No, Matthew. I was thinking Matthew Crowley. That's Dan Stevens. Matthew Good.
Okay.
A young Matthew Good too.
Seen that guy.
I love him.
All right.
So
there's 3 boys in this one. That's fine. You can do that.
And then Lily James.
I do like Lily James.
I love Lily James. Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with that.
Cool.
Cool.
All right, well, then our works here is done. Thank you for liking this movie so much that I wanted to do it.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Gotta watch it like yearly.
Good. Yeah. Happy to have an occasion to do this one. Coming up next, I'm either going to, it depends. Some people are on vacation or sick. We might get another rom-com in before we switch to Oscars. If not, I think I have the lineup pretty much set, at least in some order. I know 3 of the movies we'll do are Past Lives, Oppenheimer, and Barbie, because, I don't know, it's fun when people listen and they like those shows. So. And Past Lives, enough of us really, really love that we're going to talk about that one, I think, on the next episode, or at least the first Oscars episode. And we'll also have the ladies, and the voting for the ladies will open this Friday, March 1st. So I hope I put that Google Doc together in the next few days. Yeah. Because the Oscars are the 10th this year, so it's coming up. Yeah. I don't know. We're going to do one more Oscar nominee aside from the 3 I mentioned, but the ladies will come probably after the Oscars, and we'll try not to be too influenced by the outcome of those awards. We'll see what happens.
Perfect.
Anyway, thanks, Martha.
Thank you.
This was fun. You can find our stuff on Linktree, linktr.ee/late to the movies, and tune in next time for, I actually don't know what's coming next specifically.
Keep on your toes.
It's probably Past Lives.
Perfect.
Anyway, see you then.
Bye.